Hey everybody,
We'll
welcome
see.
to Behind the Bar. I'm your host, Danny Johnson, where I interview your favorite dry bar comedians. I'm lucky enough today to have my first repeat guest, as you can see, Marty Simpson on today, his second special. You guys are great. You guys are great. Oh my gosh, so great. That's the name of his special. You guys are great. His first one is I Am Coach, which we talked about on your last time here. Watched your second one yesterday, Mr. Fancy Pants in his suit. But yeah, man, it's good to have you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Danny. I wish we could get down. I wish I could get in the area more often. We could do some shows together. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I'll do anything you want, anytime you want.
Yeah, I think we talked about last time when we worked together for Trial by Laughter, that Comcast NBC thing, you locked your keys in the car and that's when we got
Yeah.
to know each other. So it was really meant to be, right? It was like,
Yeah, I think that's the recommendation I have for young comics. You're like, what's your best networking tool? I'm like, get a ride somewhere and then, I mean, offer a ride to a comic you want to hang out with, and then lock your keys in the car as you're coming out of the place you go to, and then you get a good afternoon with each other.
right, and now he has to talk to you.
Right.
That's how
Right.
that's how you've gotten all your friends and all your relationships in your life. You've made some disaster happen and you're like, well, now we're in an
Yeah.
elevator
Right.
that I
They're
rigged.
like, they're like, how did you get Letterman? I'm like, oh, Letterman was in the elevator and he ran out of gas. And so then I put him in the back of my car and then locked my keys in my car. And then we hung out for the afternoon. No,
You know what I
that's
noticed about your special that I liked a lot. I liked your first one obviously, but the second one seemed more conversational. It was very sort of laid backish and
yeah. I,
very timing and enjoying some of the pauses and stuff like that. It was different.
well, I think the second one, I appreciate you saying that. I think the second one is probably more accurate to me. And the first one, I was like, let me make sure I do the exact bits that I plan to
Uh,
do versus like, I'm going to just go do 30 minutes, 25 minutes of a great set and hang out with them. But what happened on the second one that really made what you're talking about happen was the first audience, which I don't know if you remember Marin. Marin is like one of my favorite people out there, Allie and Marin. And they were like, this is the first time this has ever happened, really, like it happened, where the first audience was just horrible. Like,
really?
yes, I've hosted it twice. So I've advised to anybody doing dry bar, if you have a Saturday show, if you offer to host, they'll pay you a tiny little bit of money on Friday night to then host the show, and you can introduce everybody, but you get a feel for what's going on. You get to be up on the stage and everything. I just like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I've done 2 Friday nights hosting. I was actually in town and did a third hosting, just as you know, I was doing a corporate gig, and I called Marin and them and I was like, let me host, I'll host for y'all. And I have had, so it's like 10, 12, I mean, I don't even know how many shows, probably 12 dry bar sets maybe, and never had anything but a fantasy camp audience. Like, it's
Yeah.
like crazy how good the audiences are. The later audience is a little old or a little younger, so I like to adjust for that. But so I'm going second or third. I can't remember what order I went in, but I was going late enough in the set, in the order, to know this audience is not great. And then when I got out there, I was like, oh, it'll be great for me, of
Right.
course. And then they just weren't. They just sat on their hands. I don't know why they wanted to come to a taping. So I was in the middle of my set, because then, in your head, you're like, if it goes well, I'm going to do this extra
Yeah.
joke. And if it doesn't go as well, I might add this piece. Like, you're thinking all these little things beforehand. And in my mind, I was like 6 minutes in, Danny, and I just was like, we're not going to use any of this. This is not going to be used,
Right.
period.
Right.
So I'm like stare into the void of this nervous awfulness and say the lines as a rehearsal, like you're doing it. I don't even do that at home. I don't do it in front of the mirror. I never like
Yeah.
rehearse my lines actually line for line, which is probably why I mess up my lines a lot. But and I just knew. So I got off stage. I was furious. My wife had gone with me. I was just like, oh, this is terrible. This is
Yeah.
awful. And so what had happened the night before when I hosted is the first comic, um, who can remain nameless at this point, had the same experience. And then the second comic murdered. So it wasn't the audience the first night.
Okay.
So in my mind, I was like, oh gosh, I don't want to pull against this third guy.
Right. Right.
Like, I want another comic to have a great set. But in my mind, I'm like, please, be dead for the third comic too, so
Right.
it's not me. And they just were awful, and to the point where Tess, the director, came back there and said, Marty, I think they said this to everybody. I'm not trying to make myself special, but they said if the second audience is like the first audience, we'll have you back. Like we're not even going to stress. We're not going to try to edit that. We're not going to try to boost that. We're not going to. We'll just have you back. So don't
Right.
even stress. Go out there and kill the second set. If they're terrible, we're not gonna use it.
Right.
And she said we've never even told anybody that before, and because it was just so dead. It was like a corporate gig. I was like year 2 in comedy in my brain,
Right.
where it just was like, this is dry bar. Y'all know that y'all are on a taping, right? Like this is horrible. And so for the second one, I really was just kind of like, all right, man, let's just do a show. Who
Yeah.
cares? Like this is gonna be fun. But my wife did say, and the comic that I was with on the show gave me a good word. He was like, you need to close with the drug story, because that drug story was brand new, like a month
Right.
old. And that's a terrible idea to do that. And the dog bit makes me winded. The middle chunk makes me really get winded. Like,
Yeah, the roller
and so,
coaster stuff.
well, the roller coaster stuff, no, I'm talking about when I act out the electrocuted dog.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Well, I get really winded during that, and I always have, and I've always had to like cover for it in a regular set. So I just like I'll close with that, and it'll
Right.
be funny when I walk and run off stage. That'll be a hilarious moment, and I'll close with it. And and in the first show, I closed with it and ran off stage and had to walk back out to silence and be like, "Thank you, I'm Marty Simpson." It was amazing how bad it was. And so I looked at my wife and I was like, "I just need to come out blazing and like set it up the right way and just
Yeah.
not even care about it." So then I'm like winded at the start of that thing. But yeah, and I had the conversational tone is a great note, and I appreciate you saying that, because when I worked with Leanne a few times, Leanne Morgan, and I don't like to drop names, but let's drop Leanne's name because she's the best.
Sure.
Um, she just is so awesome with the front 2 rows, or the guys that
Yeah.
she like half flirts with, or she's not
Right.
flirting, but she is flirting with like her nephew kind of thing. And it got me to just deliver a lot of punchlines after I worked with her down to the front row, or to say things like, don't do that, and like I'm talking to someone, so
Right.
it reads a little more conversational and whatnot, which is, I mean, my live set is very conversational and calls back a lot of the crowd work that I do.
Yeah, I would love to work with Leanne. She seems like and I almost did. Karen Mills was
Oh yeah.
ill. She was ill and she texted me and she's like, "Would you she's like, I'm probably going to do the shows, but if you're available." I think they went with you or Brian or somebody else. Um but yeah, her conversation, like it seems like she's in the living room talking to 10 people,
Yeah, yeah.
you
And
know.
that's how she came up, right? She was selling jewelry,
I had no
like
idea. Yeah.
multi-level marketing. She was in like a, not Amway, but it was like a Mary Kay Amway
Mhm.
type jewelry business. And
Yeah.
her meetings got so packed with people who wanted to be there because of how funny they were,
Wow.
that she went and did it at the comedy club, I think. And then it sort of took off from there.
Yeah, and
But
I like the way in your set too, like it reminds me of watching you know, some of the greats that we watched, Bill Burr or Seinfeld, or just when you put together, even though it's not an hour, it was a half hour special. Like you plant these seeds.
mm,
You talk about cocaine actually for a split second, and then it comes back. It
right,
ties. I guess what I'm trying to say is stuff ties in eventually
right.
throughout the set.
Yeah. And that's
I
by
don't have
design
that.
too. I think that the only reason people have it is because you decide to have it. So if you don't have it in your act, you haven't decided that's in. I'm not cracking on you. I'm saying it's like,
Right.
it's not, what I'm trying to say. It's not difficult to do that if you just apply one little principle, which is like,
Mhm.
here's a bit that has the punchline mentioned more than once. Let's just tell 20 other minutes between the two halves of that
Right, because it's
bit.
different than a callback. It's not the
Right,
same. A
right.
callback's just a sequence to the previous joke. It seems like your stuff ties together. I loved it a lot.
Well, I appreciate that. I always call it a callback, but I've always been narcissistic enough to feel like they were just really great.
Well,
But I like what you're saying is they're different. It's just a different thing. But
I
yeah, I
think
do
because
understand.
like what I meant, like when you do the little mention about cocaine and the drug, in the one bit, and then you come back to it, and I was like, oh, that makes more. Now it makes more sense and it's funnier because you tied it in.
Right. Like the B plus joke, when you hear it the first time, you're like, I wonder why he did that on the special.
Right.
And then 8 minutes later, you're like, oh, this makes way more sense
I
now. Like my
loved it.
dad, thank you. My dad always called it, and I always remember this when I was little, not little, but watching Evening Improv when I'm 13 or whatever with my dad, the ones he would fast forward to that weren't dirty enough or whatever. He would say when the comedian gives you a callback or mentions something from before, my dad always said it's like the comedian thanking you for paying attention.
Right.
So it's like this, it's a very Leanne Morgan thing of like, it's like I'm being polite and mannerly to the audience is how I took it. Like it's a way to shake their hand without them having to be part of the conversation literally. But Horace Sanders, my original OG mentor, said that the conversation with the audience is always happening. Your part of the conversation is the jokes and their part of the conversation is the laughter. And if you're not listening in the conversation, you're being rude, was just kind of how he taught it to me. And so I feel like another way to make them feel included is to tell them thanks for being here, and so a lot of comedians are like, thanks for being here, quite literally. But I just feel like it's a way to say something. But sometimes I'll write the first joke or the first bit. Sorry, let me get that off camera.
You're right.
I don't have a cough button. Sorry. I'm always writing the story first. And then I think to myself, what other bits am I already doing or have done or have given up on that could be related to that? And where that comes from is I'm like 4 years in maybe, and I did the bat story that's on the first special.
Yeah.
And I said, they'll probably go to that house right there. That, and that was it. I thought it was funny enough that we sent the bats to the neighbor's house.
Right.
But then a guy after the show, one of my brother's friends, who's actually an entertainer, a real talented guy, and Dave Bushnell is his name. If he ever watches this, I think he follows me and he might get a shout out. I gave him a special thanks on the special. He said, I thought the bats were going to go to Travis Michael's house. Because I guess 20 minutes earlier, I had told a foul language bit about these kids teaching my kids foul language. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they will now for every show for the rest of my career.
Yep.
But the reality was Travis and Michael were 10 years removed from the bats in my life.
Okay.
And so I'm writing all these jokes and everything 5 years apart, 7 years apart. I never connected that I said the word neighbors twice. Or so all the audience has is Marty, his house, his neighbors. Well, now Marty's at his house and has bats in it. So it was like I was spoon feeding it to them that it would go to Travis and Michael's house. I mean, I was actually explaining to them that it went to Travis and Michael's house without knowing it.
Yeah.
And so I now write, I write this bit and I read the bit and I'm like, okay, what else do I say that is in any way related to this? And then find out whether or not, and then you try it. And sometimes there get groans. Sometimes you can force that callback and you get a groan, and I don't want to groan. But the drug one was really a long time in the making. Like Lee Pitts is my best friend from childhood. He changed his landline. His parents changed his landline. That's why I'm willing to say the real phone number. I say Lee Pitts.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, because they changed their landline. My parents still have their landline.
Okay.
And he's just the funny friend that he's one of the groomsmen in my wedding. And he's like, Marty, tell your mom and dad if I'm ever calling from jail, it's because you're the only phone number I know by heart. And I was like, that's the funniest thing that I've heard in a while. And so for 2 years, I had this, I can't really make this funny. I struggled with like, where are the punchlines in that bit? And then when I almost went to jail this past year, I was like, well, this is when I get to use my phone call. And so now that bit's going to be funny. So I knew I had that. I'm out here calling Miss Pitts. Like I knew I had that because I said that the night of, like, I was like, because it would have been my parents or my wife that I called, obviously, but I'm texting my friend Lee saying, like, I think I might need a phone call. This might be the time you would have needed it. And so it became this conversation. And then, 6 months before that, I had gotten in trouble with the Hampton Inn people for my fiber being all over the place and the cleaning lady thinking I was doing lines of coke in the room. That had happened. And I couldn't really make that funny either on its own.
Right.
Because it had some elements to it that were just she didn't speak English. I didn't want that to be a big deal. And then for 10, 15 years, I've been wanting to make fun of my narcolepsy. But so many comedians make fun of narcolepsy in a way that's hack.
Right.
I just didn't want to sign up to be on the list of that, but I really do have it and I really do take it. And so it all kind of came together with that one story where the drug dogs showed up, and I was like, well, this is gonna have 3 or 4 callbacks in it. Like, this is
Yeah,
gonna
it's like finding a piece of the puzzle that you were missing, like in the literal sense. You're like,
right.
what is the missing a little of that? I'm glad I now know you have narcolepsy from watching your special. I'm glad I chose to drive around with you.
Well, I'm always good on my drugs. That's, you want me to be your driver over your other friends because I have like I have DSM-5 medicated reasons why I'm not going to fall asleep when I'm driving.
Right, right,
And I don't have cataplexy. I don't just like fall over like the goats on YouTube
right.
that are cool and just
I
fall
saw a
over and
video of a
stuff.
dog that just falls over with
Yeah, that's cataplectic. That's a different diagnosis altogether. And you would have driver elements there that are different. You'd have a different driver's license and whatnot. And
yeah.
oh, this is awesome. My agent's calling me during this call. So I'm gonna text him and tell him that I'm live on a podcast. Do I need to like be rude about it or not?
Right. I like how you opened your special with I wrote it down, clean, family friendly, dry bar appropriate child abduction humor.
That was my dream, Danny. I was like, actually, there's a story behind that on the callback too. Hold on a live podcast. It's not live, but it is live, right?
Yeah.
We'll call you back. I'm not even
Who's
sure
your
my
agent? Is it
choice.
an agency or is it a person?
It's great. Tim Grable.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, he changed my life, man. Tim Grable's the guy.
I can tell you what he told me when I talked to him.
Uh, what did he tell you?
First question he asked, this is a couple years ago. How many followers he got?
That's funny. I don't have any.
And I was like, wow. And then he
Well, I
goes,
can.
I said, if I'm bad at marketing myself, and he goes, well, if you're bad at it, how can I be good at it? I'm like, I don't know. You're the manager. You're the
Yeah,
agent.
yeah. He just the myth of that is that those guys want incoming calls and they'll
Yeah.
get you more money than you would get yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't get you more calls really, but he does a little bit for different reasons and different things. But
Yeah. Yeah. No,
but
I'm not digging him in any way. I thought it was funny. Like,
yeah,
I'm terrible at something. I'm looking for support and partnership. And he's like, well, I need you to be good at that.
right.
And then I'll partner
Yeah.
with you. I'm like, oh,
What's
okay.
funny about Tim Grable too is you have to read his emails and listen to him on the phone as if it's C3PO. And then everything he says is very encouraging and very like criticism in the right way, because it's just this AI droid telling you factual things that he believes. But if you listen, sometimes he can just break your spirit with the with the frankness of what he says. But when you hang up, I rarely have ever, if ever, disagreed with anything that he
Right.
said.
Of course.
But in the moment, he's just like, yeah, why does your website say this, this, and this, and this? That's preventing me from being able to get you booked. I'm like, I thought that was the cool way to word it. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Like,
Yeah.
and but the reality of Tim Grable's changing my life, two things are involved in that. Was I did a show, Leslie Norris Townsend's Clean Comedy Challenge, which I recommend any young comic go do. Is fantastic. I don't get commission for sending people there, but I do think that she cares about people and she cares about the development. And I was on it 7 or 8 years after that I had won it, which is not a big deal to win it necessarily, but and there was 29 comics on the showcase after the little festival at this one church in Nashville. Grable and his kids and his wife were in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd already worked for him like 2 or 3 times over 4 years. It's just like the last minute fill in type thing. And so I mean, he knew who I was. And I was 28th out of 29 comics, and 20 of the comics were new Clean Comedy Challenge
Yeah.
comics that were, some were good, some were great, others were not.
Right. Right.
And so then now you're 2 hours and 40 minutes into the show, and I do 10 minutes to help close it. And then Joby Sad murdered after I did. And I
Yeah.
had a good set. I mean, I don't like to be the guy that's like, I crushed, but I had a fine set that I was
Sure.
very proud of at the moment for no one going 2.5 hours in. And his 2 daughters loved my stuff and wanted to buy my merch and came over and just wanted to talk to me for like 30 minutes. And then, so it was like that scene in The Natural when
Yeah.
the lady in black at the start is like looking at the whammer and she's going to murder the whammer. And then she's like, I'm gonna focus on Robert Redford here. It was kind of like
Right.
Grable came probably to see other comics or to see the young talent and everything. And then he was like, oh,
Yeah.
if my teenage daughter's like this guy, maybe I can sell him. And
Right.
then part 2 of that was Jeff Allen blew back up again. And
Right.
so he priced himself out of a lot of gigs. And, you know, getting other people's gigs is a science. Like if
Yeah.
like Johnny W gets Tim Hawkins gigs because he sings and he's awesome and he's witty and
Yeah.
and so, but like if people already wanted Tim, they're not going to naturally want Marty. Sometimes I would win those gigs, but most of the time I'm not. But if they already wanted Jeff Allen, then Johnny W with guitar is a natural fit for that.
Right.
Now Johnny's great and he's going to win that sometimes too. But if you've already decided I want a conversationalist that makes fun of his wife, that's mean, that has like a past that keeps him bitter, well, like I'm like a miniature version of Jeff Allen, sort of in terms of a stylistic,
Right.
you know. And so I started getting a lot of that, and that was easy for Grable. Like, hey, if you want Jeff and can't afford him, here's this other guy, Marty. Boom, we get booked right away. And then, like you were alluding to, he just wants to answer the phone and have the comic say yes and have the venue say yes and then move on. And that started happening a lot. And then we got invested with each other because I just love the guy. And then COVID happened, and then I did a lot of virtual stuff for him, and so we've you know, we're in it together forever.
I like
Me.
that's such a funny premise to me that agents have that roster and that list of like, all right, well, you want Dennis Regan and he's whatever, this dollar amount. And you're like, well, we have another observational guy who's
Right.
he's a little less.
Right. Well, and what's funny is it's sort of like the timing of when I blow up needs to happen for Grable after he's already courted a version of me that'll be cheaper. Like, because if I blow up,
Right.
then I'm going to price out the gigs that Jeff priced out and that nobody can really do. Then he's going to lose gigs to other agents who have a similar bidder
It's like a
dead
minor league
inside.
system. It's like a
Yeah,
baseball minor leagues.
it is. Except, I mean, I think we do better than the minor leagues because I
Of
feel like
course.
the trail off that I get from Jeff Allen probably pays better than the minor league baseball
Oh, for
guys
sure.
get. But
For sure.
yeah.
Can we go back to, you said you had a funny story about the child abduction or how it
Yes.
came about?
Well, I appreciate you saying this, and this is my wife also. And even probably Sean Reynolds, who's another. I always word it, Danny, like if
Yeah.
there were a wedding in my comedy career, the groomsmen in my comedy career would be people, and so like Johnny W and Sean Reynolds and guys like that are probably groomsmen in my comedy career.
Yeah.
Like
I've
Danny
had them both
Johnson's
on.
probably like an usher, or maybe like the guy that I invited to the wedding. But like we've had 15 or 30 hours together. Where like Sean Reynolds and I had 15 hours last week together, and we're in a fantasy football league together and everything. So it's like those type of guys. But Sean was always just kind of like, Marty, you know, when you open, he's like, when you open strong, you do better. And I tend to open with like observational stuff about the room or whatever,
Yeah.
because we do so much corporate work where they like do this awful, boring thing at 11 a.m.
Right.
And then at 11:30 before lunch, now comedian Marty Simpson, like golf
Yeah.
claps as you walk up in terrible classroom lighting in a conference room,
Right.
audio's coming out of the ceiling. And why they do it that way, I have no idea, because they've paid an outrageous amount of money for you
Right.
to do this terrible set in front of their
Yeah.
people at
And
11:30
you
in the
know
morning.
it's going to be rough. And you
Yes,
can't say
you
that, hey,
know.
this is going to be terrible.
I do tell them like 2 months in advance on the pre-call. I'm like, your expectation should be here because of your facility. Like, it
Hmm.
will not be my fault. Like, if you make it, this is what I've been telling people when I do the pre-call. Like, Grable's already booked it, and I get the pre-call with them. I'm like, all I want is for you to make it my fault if the show is bad.
Right.
And then when you give negative feedback, we'll read it. But if the audio's bad, the lighting's bad, the setup is bad,
Yeah.
it's your fault. Like,
Right.
and you're going to be like, why did we pay that person? I mean, you could bring in Foxworthy and have that same setup, and maybe
Yep.
he'll rise above it with some jokes or whatever. A guy with a guitar like Johnny could maybe rise above some of that. But I have gotten to the point now where doing it 15 years, I can do great in that environment, but that environment becomes a character in the show.
Yeah.
So I wrote these jokes where it's like, I'm not even going to start my set yet. Like, don't email us about that because I haven't even started yet. You know, every comedian starts right at the beginning. That's pretty hack and unoriginal. I like to start somewhere in the middle,
Right.
and we'll get going, and you'll be like, I think he started. No, it'll be after that, but before I finish, unless I forget. Like that kind of, it's a little bit hacky, but it's this device when you don't have an opener. I don't want to do my second best joke at the opening
Right.
of an 11:30 in the morning show because they're going to hate it. They're going to not like your second best show if it's
Right.
the first thing out of your mouth.
Right.
And so I wanted, and Sean gave me the words of wisdom, was like, don't, come out with a great joke for your dry bar special, because what you do live in the room in a corporate thing isn't going to play on a television set. And so the first show, I didn't do the child abduction joke to start with. I put it in the middle, and I started with some COVID material or whatever that that just some older COVID stuff that I wanted to get rid of so I could do it on the taping. And then when that first audience was bad, my wife looked at me and she was like, "You just need to come out with child abduction and just get it over with,
Yep.
and you'll know." She's like, "You'll know whether the second audience is good or not
If they're with you, yeah,
exactly." Like, meaning that's a joke that's 100%. Like, that joke has never not gotten the laughs where I want it to get. It occasionally gets the Lauren Michaels, like, I'm not sure if it's the right laugh, but it's never gotten no laugh.
Right.
Right. And so, but the story about that though is that the callback to that one is the Keys Kids jokes that is kind of for my
Your
first
first special.
special.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the guts in my first dry bar special to do child abduction jokes
Oh, okay. Interesting.
because you watch the video and they're like, no drug reference, no sex reference, no abuse reference, no. I mean, they outline everything, and I'm like, I feel like child abduction is all of these things.
Right.
Like, literally the list that they say don't have involved in it.
Yeah.
In my brain, I was like, it could be argued that any child abduction joke, even if it's a parody of a child abduction joke,
Right.
like mine is, and so, because I when I do it in my shows, I'm like, that's kind of my thing. That's the space I'm working in, which is also a line Sean Reynolds helped me with. I say, but that's cool if y'all didn't like that child abduction joke, because I got another one I'll do later in the set.
Right.
In fact, that's when the show is over, when you hear that second child abduction joke. And of course, with my looking to the side and pausing and living in the awkward right then, everyone thinks I'm just full of myself and joking, right? I mean, they're all like, he's, he doesn't have a second child abduction joke. Or they're already with me and now they're looking forward to my second child abduction joke.
Right.
And so then when I say during Keys Kids, maybe the janitor got him, because Keys Kids, for people who don't know my comedy, is like, for this Zambian woman couldn't find her children, but when she ran in looking for them, she was yelling, "Where are my kids? Where are my kids?" But in her Zambian accent, she was saying, "Where are my keys? Where are my keys? Where are my keys?" And I thought she was saying keys. So I look for them under desk drawers, in lockers, locked lockers. And then I say, and you know what? During third period, I saw some under these bleachers. Maybe the janitor got them.
Right.
Maybe he took them home for the weekend. And if he does that, you're probably never going to see him again. And it's like, I didn't even know it was a child abduction joke for years. And then I did a sex trafficking ministry fundraiser at Arrowhead Stadium. Very elite and awesome event. Like, an American Idol singer was like opening. And I was like, this is a big deal. And the lady sat me down like 8 minutes before the show and was like, okay, we just need to go over real quick. Do you have any jokes about this? Do you have any jokes about this? And do you have any jokes that would imply like abduction or anything like that? And I was like, no, what? Wait.
Yeah.
I think I totally have a child abduction joke. Like, I really have, like, just a straight up abduction reference. And she's like, yeah, don't do that, because there's like 50 survivors here that could be triggered.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy cow. So now I'm like 8 years into comedy, like, I do a child abduction joke. So then when I wrote the Taken joke, I was like, okay, well now based on what we've already talked about at the start of this podcast, I was like, these two things go together really well.
Yeah.
So I didn't have the Keys Kids to do again, because I did it on I Am Coach. So the funny story was, I almost didn't do the child abduction joke at all. But then the first audience was so bad, my wife was like, you just need to start with child abduction. Just don't even worry about not having the callback. Just tell it and just lean into the mic. And then Sean Reynolds texted me when he saw the special. He was like, I can't believe you just came out and told jokes. You never start like that. It's great. Yeah. So I was really sadly proud of myself, because I didn't just waller in self-pity to open the show.
Yeah.
I like actually opened with my second best joke and closed with my best joke, like you're supposed to
do. I still see comedians like address the fact that the audience is a little stale. I don't think I ever do that. I think it hurts them. They come out like, hey, what's going on? What's wrong, guys? Let's see a little live, like,
well, at the beginning, meaning you're like, you guys are dead. Like, if you say it at the beginning, yeah, my personal philosophy, I think it was Bill Gorgo, from Chicago, who I met at the Clean Comedy Challenge, who I again recommend anybody go to, that taught us like you can get away with saving your joke by addressing the audience once, but if you say it twice, you risk convincing them that they shouldn't be. I
Yeah.
mean, people
You're,
might not have laughed at your joke because they didn't hear it or they didn't see it right, they didn't get it, and you tell them, "Oh, that's you'll get that later in the car," which is awful hack thing to say, but if you save it, you get that one laugh with saving, but then now 5 minutes later you save it again, they know like this guy has to save his jokes, and then the third time, then you're just telling them you're bad.
yeah, you're almost
Um,
telling them they're right
yeah,
by not
exactly.
laughing.
Yeah, exactly. That which I do the opposite of, like when five people clap instead of an applause break. That's I like to say, you're right. You're right to clap there.
Yeah.
Everybody else was wrong. Like the room was wrong, but
Right.
you four people who clap there, y'all are the right
Is
ones.
your cardio your dad telling you to do cardio punchline in the child abduction piece?
No, and that's got a funny story too.
I love
And
that.
well, Angie Stubbs in Alaska would be very happy you said that, because if you look at the special thanks in my special, I thanked Angie Stubbs in the special thanks randomly amongst three other people. And the reason for that is when she first started doing comedy at the CC's Christian Comedy Association, CCA, um, her family kind of recruited me to, I think they liked my set or something when they saw it. And then they just said, can Angie send you her material and you like work with her writing some? And so for like 2 years when she started out, every couple of weeks or months, she would just send me a set she did, and I would just send back notes. And so we ended up writing some things together. And then she doesn't do comedy as often, but one of her first things that she sent me had her dancing on the stage. And of course I wrote like, you don't dance for a minute and a half of your 5 minute sets just to get a laugh. She was like, but it was killing. I'm like, I know it's killing, but
Right.
you don't get laughs by dancing on stage in general. Get laughs by what you say when you get on stage. And but then her like kind of opener line, she was winded for like the first minute of the thing, and she said, my sister gave me some notes on my set, and basically she said the exact joke, and then we tooled that joke into her set in a way that she could dance sometimes and be winded and everything. And so over the 7 years, every now and then when I get winded on stage, you just say that, you just say a friend's joke that you helped write or whatever, but I never intended to have it be my joke
Hmm.
on a special. And then I just was so winded, and I hadn't said it out loud in like 5 years probably. And then I said it because I needed to have a laugh happen because I was so winded in the middle of dry
Yeah.
bar. And I thought, well, I'll tell them to edit this out, you know. And then I called Angie right after the specials when we got home, and I hadn't talked to her probably in a year. She won my fantasy football league with other comedians like 2 of the 5 years we did it. And so I hadn't talked to her in like a year. And I just said, I got some bad news for you, but it's your call. If you want to tell me to edit this out,
Right.
I 100% will. And I'm a stickler. Like I wouldn't ever want to do somebody else's joke, like ever. Like that's just in my mind. I stole it, even though I helped develop it. It's still like,
Right.
God knows your heart. So I feel like I helped her make her joke better, but it was hers. And she was like, Marty, I haven't done comedy in forever. I don't even care. I'd love it if it was on there.
That's
And
great.
so that's why I gave her the special thanks. But it'd be my intention to not keep it in my act forever
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
But it is just a great line. I mean, it's a great line that she did. So I don't have any pride about that. But if she would have said, oh, I'm going to do it, I do that in every show, which I do think she would have been comfortable to say to me. Like
Of
we
course.
had a pretty intense like mentoring thing going on where I would give her really hard feedback, which is one reason I kept working with her, is because she could just take it. She could just take the Tim Grable-esque truth. And so, but yeah, I love that. Like of my lines of the 28 minutes, like you picked out the one that she wrote. So that's great. That's awesome. Thanks for that, Danny.
Yeah. I I like, and you dressed up for this special. So if you look at your historic tracksuit jacket, hat,
Yes.
sneakers, you won it with the suit, which looks sharp.
Thank you.
Custom
And
made hat. That's how fancy you're getting, Marty. You got a
a
custom
custom
made hat.
made suit and a custom made hat.
Ooh.
And I got the custom made hat right here.
Okay.
I'm bald, everybody, if you didn't know that from the
Yeah, I
podcast.
don't. I think we're both
Yeah,
hat
but
friendly.
you have a tattoo, you have the bald, you can shave it all the way bald. This actually matches my little Adidas thing here. This
Yeah,
is
it
good.
does.
But so this hat has a story too. Well, for starter, I've been wearing a suit for 2 years before the special, kind of. And that's a Grable thing too. And this is I wore the tracksuit, I wore the Adidas because I loved it, and Coach Simpson is a character. But honestly, I used to have jokes about this, but they kind of just weaned their way out of my act. But like the joke used to be something like, "This is not a costume. This is just what was on top." The talking about the Adidas suit, and I'd be like, "Y'all think this is like a big thing that I planned for? This is just a Wednesday to me." Like, and it was just funny to get out, but the Coach Simpson stuff did work. But then I felt like it narrowed the perception of me down a little bit. So if you just see a thumbnail on a YouTube video or whatever,
Right.
like I'm like the Adidas guy, which is fine because I am the Adidas guy. But then I did a few shows where you get hired by a corporation to roast the corporation or to host their fake Golden Globe Awards or
Right.
whatever, and they want you to wear tux. And the shows went great. And then Grable and I were like, man, this is like significantly more zeros at the end of these checks.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of comedians be like, I'm not going to do corporate work, and you're selling out and everything. And I'm like, yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but we say dumb things into a microphone and expect people to pay us for
Yeah.
it. So I don't, I just think nothing is precious. Like a writing agent that I went to school with named Andrew Kersey taught me that 15 years ago. He's a good friend of mine growing up in childhood. He's a writer's agent in Hollywood. He's very successful. And he's like, Marty, nothing is precious. Write a script, submit it, get it sold or not, and then write another one.
Yeah.
Because the one that's your baby that you think is precious, nobody cares about.
Yeah.
Like most likely you're going to sell it. In the scenario where you sell it, it's going to be a page one rewrite. And you're going to get story by. You're not even going to get written by credit, but you're going to get your money for them having bought it. So you got to get out of your head that anything you've done is precious. Not to mention the fact that I didn't invent coaching comedy. I didn't invent wife comedy. I didn't invent talking about your kids.
Yeah.
Like I'm just basically doing what Cosby
And
did.
I mean, celebrities do corporate work, do corporate gigs. So I don't know
Well, yeah,
why
I will. I
anybody
will.
would complain about that.
Yeah, but I will say, like Foxworthy gets his 50 grand or 100 grand or 300 grand to go do Foxworthy's set,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're like they get to brag they had Foxworthy.
Right.
Like what I actually am carving out a career to do is like I'm gonna go do something that they can't get Foxworthy to do, which is interview their leadership team and then roast their leadership team
Right.
in a way that's not offensive, that doesn't use foul language, that doesn't get them all fired.
Right.
And
Right.
so, and that's kind of not been hard for Grable to sell. So, and it's so fun for me because, I got paid $17,500, Danny, to teach Christian school for a year.
Right.
And I got $2,200 to coach the football team on top of that. So I
Right.
made less than $20,000 for 12 months of straight up 90 hours a week,
Yeah.
slave labor. And if they want me to do 15 minutes of my material on a Saturday night, after Friday, I've spent 7 hours in a conference with them hosting these little seminars.
Right.
And then 3 hours on Saturday, opening the ceremony and giving out the awards like Billy Crystal or Steve Martin would host the Oscars and wear a tux.
Yep.
And they want to pay potentially more than the Christian school paid
Right.
for the
Right.
2 days. Yeah, I'm gonna sell out, Danny. That's what
Yep.
I'm gonna do.
Yeah. 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 Of course. Of course.
But also to the young comics out there, like I talk down to my audience anyway. Like when Coach Simpson can insult the audience somehow, not mean, but a little Don Ricklesy. I'm not saying I am as good as Don Rickles. Nobody would say that. He's like the GOAT. But I do believe that when I'm at my best, I'm implying to the audience that I feel like I'm a little better than them. I'm talking down to them a little bit.
Right.
So roasting a crowd is what I would do anyway. If they hired me to do my set, 8 minutes of my 45 minutes is going to be ad-libbing roasting them. Well, now I just do more of that.
Yeah, I think it's tougher because you don't have the liberties you would in a non-corporate setting. You know what I mean? You have to make it tasteful. You can't get up there and be like, the CEO Ted in his third DUI last December.
Right.
Like
Exactly. And that is because they want that, they want Bill Burr to come in and just rake them over the coals, but they know they can't do it.
Yeah.
And so what we sell is sort of like Marty's MO, and this is truly how I feel in my heart, is I want the people leaving thinking, oh, I wish he would have made fun of our table.
Right.
not leaving thinking, I'm so glad he didn't make fun of our table.
Yes, that's
And if you,
great.
yeah, if you come at it from that angle, then what you're trying to think of making fun of is the true roast. Like I'm not making fun of the DUI. I'm, I'll if a guy had 3 DUIs, I might be like, where are we going after? I guess I need to drive table 2,
Right.
you know, and then be like, oh, but y'all don't know about that. Okay, well, if you don't know about that, you're not going to learn it from me.
Right.
And then go back to table 2 and be like, you're welcome. I mean, that it just is totally different than just Dave Attell
Yeah.
or Jeff Ross just explaining that this guy has a DUI or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But if it's a DUI, they wouldn't have told me that, because what I do is I ask the people, send me a list of all the people you want me to make fun of, and send me the things that should be said about them.
Mm-hmm.
And 90% of the time, it's just having the balls to say the things they told you to say.
Yeah. Do you have notes when you do that, or do you have
A
to
lot of
memorize all
times,
that?
yeah, a lot of times, kind of like Geraldo would have notes at the roasts, and he'd have his white paper. It's a little charming, actually, sometimes.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm
but
I
then, but yeah, but the most thing you're doing at a corporate event, though, and Grable would back this up, the most important thing you're doing at a corporate event is showing up on time, not getting high, not getting drunk, and not partying with the people after in such a way that's embarrassing.
Yeah.
And so being funny at a corporate event is like ninth on the HR person who hired you's
Yeah.
list.
Yeah.
Like, you show up on time, they're like, okay, comedian's here. Because the other 4,000 things that they're doing that day, they don't have to worry about the comedian being here.
Yeah.
And then, is the comedian going to be offensive? No.
Because
So don't be
you're the wild card in their
exactly.
playbook.
Yeah. And also, like as a 52-year-old, and Danny, however old you are, like we're past our prime in terms of being famous, and like we're not Taylor Tomlinson, we're not young person getting a show.
Right.
So that ship has sailed for me. And so when I go to the comedy club, I'm a novelty to, like, if I open for Joe Zimmerman and I have drinks after, and he's like, man, you're really great. And I'm like, man, thank you, Joe. That's awesome. And then we play golf, and he's a scratch golfer, and he's amazing. But he's young enough to where Joe's going to have a show. Like, Joe's a genius. But if I go to a corporate event and 400 dentists who make $500,000 a year spend 2 hours after the event pouring on me compliments,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of feel like that celebrity.
Right. Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's a sellout in a way, but it's not the
I think
worst.
it's just making a living, a good living.
Well, yeah. And I think that when you talk to the young comics who are getting bitter about the grind, and then you get the text like, how do I get some of that corporate money? I'm like, yeah, you wear a suit for 2 years. So all of your videos have you in a suit. Are you willing to do 9 a.m. comedy? Like, because a lot of corporate comedy is 9 a.m. comedy.
You just have
Like,
to think that the place of business, because of fear of lawsuits and that you have to be non-offensive and funny.
right,
Just don't.
right.
It,
Which a lot of people, now there is corporate work that you get hired and you're allowed to be offensive.
sure.
And I get that work, and I go do my thing, and they don't care that I wasn't offensive.
Yeah. A lot of
They don't
times that's
notice.
off-site, like off. If it's not at the facility, it's like in a
Mm-hmm.
ball. Not a ballroom, but it's someplace outside of the business walls.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not funny. I don't think I'm funny if I were filthy. Like, I just don't think it's authentic.